The global order is rapidly changing right now, and I decided to share two insights that I have gained in the past 7 years after my Kundalini awakening that might help us to understand what is truly happening. I wasn't sure if what I channeled was true or not, but now in this year I started to believe because these started to manifest very, very rapidly. One of them is going to be a channeling, and the other one is going to be a past life memory that is a simultaneous life that could help us understand what is happening and what must happen and why it has to happen, so we can understand our own suffering and we can understand the consciousness process that we all go through. I'm not claiming I have all the answers. I'm going to give you exactly what I've seen, what I heard, what I channeled. I'm going to give you my explanation, and you should make your own explanation based on what I'm sharing and, of course, what you believe in. So if you haven't seen any of my videos, I had my first Kundalini awakening about 7 years ago. And one of the things that happened was that I was able to channel. I started channeling. And the second one was that I was able to connect to specific past lives that I was emotionally deeply connected to. So there was a lot of trauma there. And one of the channelings that I'm going to share right now is going to give us some kind of an explanation what is happening now. The very first channeling, by the way, that I had, this was right after my Kundalini awakening. It means that the day after, I remember I had this question that why did I wake myself up? And there was this answer that came to me that we need mass awakening. And I didn't really make much of a sense of it. I'm just like, whatever. And later on, I asked, what do you mean by awakening? That was like several years later. And awakening doesn't mean a huge thing, because that's a problem that so many people believe that now I am here and there has to be a huge shift. But awakening means that you just stop doing what you have been doing before. So basically, you start changing. And I also channeled multiple times that the system must change. And I remember I asked what is going to happen, when it's going to happen. And it said that there will be a lot of changes, but a more significant one is going to only happen when I'm in my late 70s. So that will be in a long time from now. And the full shift is going to happen from several centuries from now. So this is going to be a long way ahead, so we don't have to worry about that as of now. So the channeling I'm going to share happened just when COVID started, and it was on the 25th of April 2020. And when COVID started, I started to have a feeling that it's going to be something that might be this change or shift that I kept hearing or kept channeling. And what I channeled was, as of my understanding, is that the virus itself was just like one part of longer process that we will be going through, and this will last for more than 5 years. So this was one of my questions. Can you explain it to me? What is happening exactly with us with this coronavirus? As I said, this was right in the very beginning. And it said, things must fall apart. And I asked, okay, it sounds a bit cliche. What else can you say? Something more useful, something basically more specific. And it said that your economy will fall apart first. And I said, okay, then what? And then it answered me, then your healthcare system is going to fall apart. And I said, this is when I'm just like, okay, maybe what I'm channeling is actually stupid. And this is another thing that I keep in mind when I channel, that I I see it with an open mind that let's see if it's going to happen or if it's not. And then I said, really? How? And it said, people will lose trust in it. And this hit me really hard because it brought up trust. And when you think about our society and what's happening in our society, it's based on trust. There is a huge trust in it. And we worked on different systems to create trust, because when you trust another person, that's when economy can flourish, and that's when you can prosper, because you don't have to spend so much money on protecting, and you are also able to be open. You don't have to be suspicious. You don't have to cut yourself off. And then I asked, okay, what will replace it then? So what will replace this system that we have now, but it's going to fall apart because people are going to lose trust? And it said the school system is going to change as well. People will want decentralization. They lose trust and will have no money anyways. And when it said this part that people will have no money anyways, I got really scared. So I asked, I am scared. What can you tell me? And it said to me, you will be fine. Most people will be fine. And then I asked, something more specific? Will there be hunger? Will there be wars? And when I thought back several years later, I don't even understand myself why I asked about wars. So it was more like something made me ask about wars. This is how I see it now. I honestly don't understand myself why I asked about wars. And it didn't say that there wouldn't be wars at all. It said you won't experience any of these, so you shouldn't worry about that. We'll see it, by the way, if there will be no wars, because I'm in Europe and there is only one country between where I live and Ukraine. So this is up in the air. And then I asked what I already shared with you, how long this change would last, like this process of change. And it said for several years. And then I replied that because I didn't believe it, or I questioned it, because I already asked how long the virus would last from my true self, and it didn't talk about several years. And then I said that my true self said something completely different, and it replied, yes, but the changes will take over 5 years. And now we are at 5 years later, because this was in 27th of April, so nearly 5 years later. And of course, I asked, what do you suggest to do? As I kept asking it so many times, and the answer is always the same. It never changes. Find yourself. And when I ask how, the answer is always the same. It doesn't matter which year I ask or from who to ask when I channel, it's always the same. Listen to your pain, allow to feel the pain. So basically the pain has to be processed. We are reliving a trauma, and what we experience in our reality is the way our consciousness is trying to push us basically to overcome that. And the other clue that I believe would be really helpful to understand the process and also overcoming the pain, overcoming the trauma, is sharing my channeling. I lived a life with a past life husband that I keep talking about nearly all the time. And in that life, we were Europeans. We left Europe during World War II because both of us were Jewish. And we moved to Canada, we moved to Montreal. And because we still had family members back in Europe, my husband went to join the army and he died in the war. These are the things that I recollected. I don't know if it's true, if it's not true, but the story itself is really interesting because I was able to connect to him and I was able to communicate with him. And I remember I said this, that you saved us, you protected us, your sacrifice didn't go for nothing. And he replied this: in that reality, the Germans won. And this is when we can bring into the quantum reality that is underneath our consciousness. And we have to understand that we only experience one version of reality, and consciousness itself, or quantum consciousness itself, is an underlying part. And quantum reality works in a way that there are these different probabilities, but what you see is dependent on what is the most probable. So what is the most dominant? Because as of now, we have these probability clouds, that there are very, very dominant things and there are less dominant things. And whatever is the most dominant, that is going to be your reality. And the very end of this, I would say, cycles that we are going through is when all of these probabilities are going to be equal. And this is when you see everything. This is basically the final stage of consciousness evolution, that there will be no dominance. It doesn't mean that everything ceases to exist. It means, in my understanding, that it's not about all probabilities exist all at once, but also they are also equal. And because they are all equal, you will experience all of them all at once. You will feel everything all at once and perceive everything all at once. But we don't have this type of consciousness yet. We are going through different stages of consciousness evolution to get there. And that's why I believe that there are these breaking points in our reality that keep happening, and the opposite of that also exists somewhere. And it doesn't matter which reality we live, when the consciousness process basically speeds up, changes are going to occur more frequently. And this is, in my opinion, what we experience now, that in one reality, in our reality that we experienced as we live now, is the one version where the Germans lost. So basically that type of mentality. So we should see it as that mindset, that nationalist mindset, basically lost. And this gave the power of the open-minded reality, which is basically the West and the United States. And now we see that falling apart, and they are changing very, very rapidly. And in my opinion, this shows something that we have to understand, that we have this belief that there are these two types of people. One of them who trust naturally, and it means that they were brought up in a society that is a trusting society. And it can be only just a person as well, and in a type of parenting. And there is the opposite of that. So basically these are the secure people, relatively secure people, and then we have the insecure people who were brought up in a more authoritarian parenting or authoritarian relationship. And we say it naturally, or that's how we generally hear about it, that people who were brought up in a relationship with parents and also with the society that is more trusting, when they meet a person who is more authoritarian, they are going to reject that person because they will see it as unknown. So that's why it's important to have very good parenting, because when someone is toxic, you are going to reject that, because it's basically, you will say it's not normal. But in my opinion, this is not true. And what is happening now in the United States proves that, or at least for me proves that. And to understand it, I grew up in Hungary. I was born in 1980, which means that I was born under the occupation of the Soviet Union. We were occupied by the Russians for 50 years. And I was at the very, very end of it, in the very, very last decade, because they loved the Eastern Bloc. This means Eastern Europe. We call it Eastern Europe, but in reality, it's more Central Europe with a little bit of East, because even Russia, a part of Russia, is still East. That's really the Eastern Europe. But when we say Eastern Europe, we see it in a political term. It means that that part of Europe that was under the occupation of the Soviet Union. And what I'm trying to say is that in order to be really aware, I believe there is a third one. So these two are opposites, but actually a person who has been in the authoritarian system and overcame it, so recognizes the patterns and sees the patterns or the system itself as wrong, can really see it. So you have to experience it to a degree. It depends on how fast you learn to move away from it, because what's happening in the United States, first of all, for me, it was something that I could not ever imagine, because that country was, for most people, and I heard exactly the same thing from so many people, something that most people admired and most people envied. And now I feel pity. I feel sorry for those people, because I can see the exact same techniques that has been used during the Soviet Union on us. And Hungary is under a dictatorship as of now as well. I don't live in Hungary. That's why I don't live there, because I can see that the current government also uses the exact same techniques that was dominant during the occupation. And I can see what's happening in the United States, and the words they use, the fear mongering, the excuses, the denial, and even the ideas. It's the Soviet Union. And if you have never lived in it, you don't know, unless you study it a lot. But unless it truly happens to you, I don't think you can truly see the devastation. And I'm just going to say just a few things. I don't want to make it political, but just a few ideas, even with the policies that he wants to bring. This is this overprotection. I remember I grew up, so for the very first thing, we had to celebrate the 4th of April every single year. And there was a song we had to sing that we were thanking the Russians to help us and liberate us, and helping us to stay protected from the evil West. So we were brought up in a society where the West was evil, and you could see the army on the streets. And I lived in a small village, and there was army there, and they kept saying that they were there to protect us because the West would attack us. So this is basically this us versus them type of thinking, that I am the only one, and this is what the leaders say, that I'm the only one who can protect you because everyone else would use you or would hurt you. And this is the same story here all over again. And then the other thing is that we are the best. That's what we were heard as well, or that's what we were taught, that this type of society is the best, and no product from the outside was allowed in. So the whole Soviet Union was self-reliant. We made our own products, and only within the Soviet Union you could buy cars or anything. And I can tell you that it's not good, because when you don't have certain amount of competition, the system is going to become lazy, because there is no competition coming from the outside. And this is what happened to people as well, that everyone had a job in a factory, because most of the factories were owned by the state. Basically, nothing was allowed to own by the people, even the land that was owned by the state, and you were allowed to use the land, but it was taken from people. That's how the whole thing happened, that everything was taken from the people, and it was owned by the state. And they called it that's the people's money and people's everything, but in reality, a small fraction of people at the very top really used everything, and they had all the authority of everything. And if you went against it, you went to jail. If you said something that was against the system, you went to jail, or even a worst case scenario, you were sent to a freaking work camp called the Gulag, to Siberia. And if you wanted a car, of course you could have a car, but you had to wait for several years. Most of the things you wanted to buy, you had to wait a lot. So this is something just to keep in mind, and this is something that I want to share, that the problem is that there are these opposites, that which type of system would work, because now we could say, okay, this communist idea was absolutely wrong or absolutely bad, and only capitalism is good. But as I lived in both, I can tell you that both of them have good parts, and both of them have negativities as well. What we would need is to have something that is in between, because I had many friends who had, for example, shops or had pubs during the communism. And what you have to do is there was a limit. So they counted how many people live in an area, and they counted, okay, this city or village needs, I'm just saying a number, 20 shops, 30 pubs, and they didn't allow more to open. So basically they tried to make it stable, but the problem was, first of all, only those people got the rights who were close friends with the political party. And secondly is that as soon as you are in a position that you know nobody else can open, you can do whatever you want because there is no competition. Versus with the capitalist system where anybody can open, but the problem is they're cutting under each other and nobody is making money. So there should be something that is in between, and that's the whole message of my video as well, that when you are trying to decide one side or the other side, you should think about something that is a third option. And I believe this is where we are heading towards, that the overcoming of this would be a joint system of the two that brings the best out of these two systems, because both systems have something that is true in them, and we can cut out that is negative. But, and this is my final note and final message, we have to understand how the quantum system works, how quantum mechanics works, is that you will see the type of reality that resonates with you. So out of all of those realities that are possible out there, you will see the one that resonates with you. So it depends a lot on you, what you are going to experience in the future. And what you're seeing is going to be a reflection of you, what is missing from you, what still needs to be processed. And we can see it in a different way, that there are these probability centers in reality, in your reality, in everyone's reality. And it depends on you which one you are going to reach when. So it doesn't mean you will never ever get there. It only means that the time that it takes you to get there can vary. And this is when we get to the fourth dimension, where time and space will cease to exist. And it's basically a different type of consciousness, that we start seeing things from a very, very different perspective, that things are not linear. Things can be achieved, but not in a way that, okay, anything is possible. Of course it is possible, but you have to go through different steps. And those steps are going to determine when you get there and how you get there. But at a certain point, you will get, everyone gets through every single stage. It's like a video game that everyone can get through the end. But for some people, it's going to be more difficult, and in some people, it's going to be easier. I hope this video gave you some insight, and see you in my next video.